Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Wealth and Wellness Report. I'm Diego, and today we have a great guest. His name is Nicholas Hardy. Nicholas and I have been friends for, like 20 years now.
2010, I think.
I think
15 years.
Like our permaculture design
2009
certification.
Or 2010.
I think it was Ben was born in 2009, and I felt like we met after he was born.
Yeah, he was a little baby the first time I met him.
Yeah, so you're like traveling from Durango and took a little, time off to come and speak with me in San Mateo. So I appreciate you being here and having a chat with me, man.
It's great being here.
Yeah. It's been like 2 or 3 years since you and I connected.
Yeah.
Because you used to work for the business and you did a lot for like a good 3 years. Mm-hmm. Management and working on projects and stuff. And then COVID hit. And then I remember that day at the garden, you were like, I gotta leave, and I was like, well, everybody at that point I felt like was leaving. So it was a different time, man. So, you left and like had a family in Colorado and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from here, there was a lot of bouncing around California before we moved. Boulder Creek at my cousin's property and doing some work down in Santa Cruz area. And then I got that job with Frank and Grossman up in Sonoma County. Lived in Sebastopol.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then after that stuff, we moved to Durango. So we've been there. Well, it's almost 3 years that we've been there now.
Yeah.
And it feels really good out there because our community has a lot of kids, our kids' age, that are good friends of ours, and like people that we're really close with are having their first kids. And so it's very young family focused. And
that's great.
There's a lot of support in the sense that we don't really need to get babysitters. We reach out to the group and say, like, we want to go on a date, and like 5 people volunteer saying, bring them over to our house and let them play with our kids. And
oh, that's awesome. So you and Alon have a time, like you guys have time to like get together outside of the day to day and have like date night and stuff like that.
Yeah. We're trying to make it more consistent, but we're working on that.
Yeah, that's super hard with 2 kids and you're both working, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it like in Durango in terms of like climate? Cause it's much different than here in San Mateo when we were working on jobs. I know you're doing landscape stuff out there.
Yeah. So Durango's the southwest corner of Colorado. So it's 6,500 feet in town, and it's, there's, 10,000 foot mountains right outside of town, like within a 25-ish minute drive, 30-minute drive. You can get to some pretty big mountains. And in town itself, you have the Animas River flowing through it. So you have right through the center of town. So you have like a really beautiful year-round river, rafting, kayaking,
awesome.
paddleboarding, swimming.
Yeah.
And there's, as far as plants, you have ponderosa pines coming in from the higher elevations, and spruce and like aspens and stuff. And then you also have the species coming in from the 4 corners of like juniper, pinyon. There's like shrubs or,
do you guys get any bristle cones out there?
No, the bristle cones kind of end more in the native, like the wild range of bristle cones ends in Great Basin.
Okay.
So middle of,
that's west.
yeah,
you guys.
basically middle of Nevada.
Yeah. I've had a chance to go visit some older groves down there in Southern California, but I never went. But like definitely, I don't know. Have you had a chance to visit and meet with some of those older trees?
Yeah, I've been at the ones in the White Mountains down near the border of Nevada a few times. I haven't had a chance to really go deep into. I've stopped briefly at Great Basin National Park, but it's a place you could spend multiple weeks and not even scratch the surface. There's a bunch there.
Yeah. Now that you guys have like landed in Durango, you guys are. Do you get a chance to travel much and enjoy? Because I know you used to you guys would travel quite a bit before the kids.
Yeah, we took the kids to Brazil 2 years ago or a year ago. A bit more than a year and a half ago ish now.
Nice.
With a whole group of friends of ours, and so there's a bunch of other little kids with us and people who didn't have any kids to support the community 24-hour travel with kids all the way down there.
Yeah.
But we come to California, go to the Sierras, go down to the house in Carmel. Alon's family has a house that's been in her family since, I want to say like 1903 or something in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And so our kids are the 7th generation to be in that house. Wow. Her grandmother was born in the house, and so was her great aunt.
Amazing.
So they go. I've been there only once so far because of how it works with my work schedule. Because it's only a summer house. There's no insulation or anything, but it's right on a lake in Minnesota, and it's really pretty, and the kids love it there.
When was the last time you were there?
Last time I was there, Judah was just over a year.
Cool.
So it's like 4 years ago.
That's so cool to me, like the intergenerational homes. You know, I know you've got a couple in your family, and something that I never had a chance to enjoy in my family. My parents were immigrants, and they just rented. So the intergenerational passing of the baton of the home, whether it's your primary or some kind of asset, is just like, it's really cool, especially when the next generation takes good care of it and they keep it, for the next generation.
Yeah.
You have like, you're this really interesting person I've known over the years, and you have like such a well-rounded outlook and perspective on life. This show is all about creating wealth and doing it through a wellness lens, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, what it means like to be a father in today's age, and like making that a priority. After having kids, like, tell me a little bit about like your self-care regimens. Have they changed? Have they increased? Have they decreased? Because having kids it's quite a lot of work, man.
Yeah. For me, the process, I want to be around as long as I can for my kids, which means doing everything I can health-wise, exercise, staying physical, eating well. I still work with the same functional medicine group I've worked with for like 7 years now, I want to say. It's been a while. And so they did a whole genetic workup panel on me to see, like, for instance, like my body doesn't methylate B vitamins. So if I take a regular B supplement, it doesn't do anything. It just goes right through me. So I need to take a methylated one that my body can actually absorb. So actually having the information to be that detailed and refined with what my body needs is very different than kind of the way I feel like most supplements are sold, and most people try to navigate that. So it's very, it's designed specifically for what my body needs.
And you did blood work for that, I assume?
Yeah, it was a blood draw, and I want to say it was maybe $500 for the lab, but every once in a while, like every year-ish, they update kind of their side of things, and so there'll be like new reports that come out and kind of just give a little bit more detail. So it's not just a static thing, because they're learning more themselves, the genetic company that kind of is tracking all this stuff. And
got it.
Some of it's like you can have susceptibility to things, and some of it's like, this is what's going on with your body. So it's gives you at least some guidance towards.
So the labs that you get are comprehensive and they tell you pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And so that's not a physician that you go to. You go to like a separate third-party laboratory or like an online.
They're through. I was working with a group that I'm really excited by, but they don't have labs around Durango. So I told them I didn't want to I was driving. When I was from last April to this November, I was working in Telluride for a really high-end landscape company. And so I was not home all the time because it's 2 hours from Durango.
Yeah.
And from there to get to a lab was close. And so I was doing some lab work at that point, but from Durango, it's 3 hours in either direction to the closest labs that do it. But around the Bay Area, you could get them super easily.
Yeah.
And
you don't mail your blood.
Yeah. This is like, you go straight to like a Quest lab and they take a lot of blood to run all the panels.
I think I'm kind of in your boat too. Like I need to start taking methylated B vitamins because my body isn't able to absorb like B12, for instance, readily. So every year I've been starting. This is going on year 3. Every year doing labs, just making sure that, this 83 model is running smooth. So the medicine that you do, a lot of medicine work too, on top of, a lot of, let me backtrack because I've learned so much from you over the years. Well, your story has just been really impactful for me because for a long time, we worked together, we were real close, and you would, share all these really amazing modalities with me. And one in particular that changed my life was working with a shaman that you had referred me to. Her name's Victoria. Mm-hmm. And at that time in my life, I was like kind of at wit's end with the relationship, and everything felt like it was crumbling. And it's just funny because it was literally right before COVID. But I had this amazing 9 months with Victoria. So I don't think I ever really said thank you for that. So I'm very grateful that you're able to put me in contact with her. Are you guys still in contact?
Victoria and I still talk, not as much as we were. She's now in Corvallis.
Okay.
And
is she still doing work?
A little bit. She's also she's in her mid 60s, I want to say. I actually don't remember how old Victoria is right now, but she needed to focus on just the material reality of things. So with her experience, she's been just doing other work to, kind of pay the bills and keep moving and keep her body functioning.
Yeah.
And I think she's doing some of that, just not to the level she was. It's not the main focus of income anymore. It's the secondary thing right now.
Yeah.
And maybe she'll shift into it again. But we've known each other for 21, 22 years.
Oh, wow,
and her son's a good friend of mine too. And she's an awesome person.
Her style or her modality of healing work is, I think, a little different than yours, right? I mean, you've got different. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because the heart breath that we used to work on was so energizing and so transformational for me. I know a lot of shamanistic work or shaman work is rooted in plant medicine. Could you talk a little bit about that?
2007 was the first time I went to Peru, and I spent almost 3 months down there. And it was actually for my senior project at Prescott College. And so I created a study of Peruvian curanderismo. So the whole views of health and healing under all the various lenses of Peruvians, from people who work with San Pedro cactus or with shuma, people who work with ayahuasca, people who, like the Quiro, who work with the spachos and other stuff but don't do plant medicine. But they have a very large knowledge base of medicinal plants and other things that they will bring in for people. I spent quite a bit of time in the north with these two women, Isabel and Alinda, working with San Pedro, and we did a trip up into southern Ecuador to the source of all San Pedro in South America. Mm-hmm. They know it's the source because the mescaline content is so much higher than anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And they had never made San Pedro tea from wild plants. It was always stuff that had been grown in people's yards and kind of cultivated. And so they were really excited to see the wild giant, 30-foot tall San Pedro cactus in these hillsides.
Different energy, for sure.
And then I spent time with Don Ignacio, who was this amazing ayahuasquero in the northern part, or I guess the southern part near the Bolivian border of Peru, in the Madre de Dios region. Mm-hmm. And he was a founding member of this indigenous village that in Spanish is called Infierno, which I always found funny because it didn't feel like hell to me. It felt pretty magical. But and I spent, over multiple trips, I spent a lot of time with Ignacio. But Don Ignacio, the first time I was there, showed me how to make the tea. And we went and gathered the chacrona, and his son went and gathered the ayahuasca liana. And then we beat the vine, which is part of the process to release the inhibitors. And then we did the whole boiling process. And it was pretty fascinating to just kind of get that, you know, and his Spanish is his second language. He doesn't speak any English. And his Spanish wasn't the easiest to understand. So there's times where I'm like, I'm not following what you're saying to me, because my Spanish is good, but not that good. And your Spanish is like, you've got your native accent coming through your Spanish, and I'm not totally sure. And so there happened to be someone who had spent 6 months living there when I arrived, this Australian man named Ruben, who I ended up traveling with some at the end of the trip. But when I couldn't respond, Ruben would say, he's asking this. It took me a while to get there too, but Ruben, his dad was Irish, his mom was Colombian, so he was fluent in Spanish from birth, basically, from learning to speak, because his mom would speak to him in Spanish all the time. So that was a really amazing experience. And one of the things we did when we did go gather the chacrona, the DMT leaves, was he knew, depending on who you ask, between 200 and 300 medicinal plants in the Amazon.
Wow.
And their functions on the body that science has shown that those functions are accurate.
Wow.
And so as we're walking, he's like pulling leaves and cutting other types of vines and saying, as you go, this is that. And like just putting them in my hands, and like, this can, you know, is a blood purifier. This cures this type of cancer, or this, like, and like, wow. I'm just like, my arms are full of all these plants, and I'm like, well, what do I do with this? And he's like, well, take it home with you. And I'm like, I can't get this through customs. He's like, throw it on the forest floor. The forest will reabsorb it. So that was a really, that marked me very deeply. And I have a lot of love for that man. He passed away a few years ago. And a lot of people received a lot of benefit from him.
How did you find yourself in the jungles with this person? Like, what took you there?
My want to work with ayahuasca was around trauma from my childhood and wanting to like clear things and have a really deep healing. And there's a lot of, it's very different now than 2007, but even in 2007, ayahuasca tourism was already starting to gain traction, and it just felt strange to me. And so I talked to people that I know who'd spent a lot of time down there and had worked with a variety of people to try to find the people who were coming from a clear place. And many sources, including Victoria, had worked with Ignacio directly and were like, that's the person to go to. So that was partly why I went there. And every time I went to that property, I had just amazing experiences. It was a really beautiful place to be. And one of my favorite memories, the morning after the first time I drank the tea, as the sun comes up in the Amazon, all the mist comes off the trees and rises. And I've heard people say that that's the forest exhaling its breath, is what that is, as the sun comes up. And that all night it's doing its inhale. So it's like a 24-hour cycle of one inhale and one exhale, basically. And just watching, you know, the mist rise, and you could see the sun rising, and then the mist came up so that it was more like kind of shrouded, and it was just very mystical and really beautiful. And that same day I was down on the river. The way that town was built, it's on this elevated floodplain that doesn't flood, but the water will come pretty close to that upper terrace, that old, what probably was a floodplain a long time ago in the Amazon. On the Rio Tambopata is the river that he lived on. And the same day, these kids from the village like sat there and played with me, like as they were swimming in the water and kind of just like goofing around. And I have all these photos of them that I definitely cherish when I look at them. And then I came back, graduated from Prescott College, and about 8 months later, I spent 6 months living in Peru and kind of going deeper, working with ayahuasca and trying to understand some of that stuff, and some of the other people I connected with on the previous trips, like just building relationships and doing pilgrimage and other things to places. And that was really beautiful. And the third time I went down, I was a tour guide, I guess would be the best way to say it, for a person I know who owns a bunch of hotels. He had organized a gathering on Lake Titicaca. And so we went to one of the islands in the middle of the lake for, I can't remember what the exact date is anymore. I'd have to look at my journals. But for an event that he had helped set up. And so I came down with 13 Americans, and to see what is the normal tourist experience there, I was a little saddened.
Yeah.
Because even though I'm the complexion I am, people were like, well, we see you all the time. You're not a tourist. Like, so they didn't like try to just flock to me and sell everything. And during that trip, it was an interesting timing because Machu Picchu was completely closed because they closed the Inca Trail for trail work, but then there was a landslide over the train tracks. And so every tour had been canceled that would normally be coming in on the trains to Machu Picchu. So all the people in Cusco and the Sacred Valley who normally have a ton of tourists to sell things to didn't have a tenth of it.
Wow.
And so they were out in a different force, but we would try to walk through a plaza, and I would turn around and there'd be like 50 people trying to sell the group things. And I'd be like, we are going to an event right now that my friend set up, and we have a schedule. Like, if you want, you can go outside the hotel and we can look at what your wares are, but we're not doing it like this. Yeah. And that was also the window where just seeing how much the ayahuasca tourism had taken off in those 3 years, I was just feeling really disheartened to such a sacred plant being used the way it was being used. So I was like, I'm not going to be a part of this at this point. And I decided I wasn't going to, my plan was to never drink the tea again and to not go back there for those reasons. And then at our permaculture design certification, there was Scarlet Blossom.
I remember. And
she was talking to me about this church she was a part of in Santa Fe at the time. And explained to me how they work with the tea. And I was like, lights on, conversations. What? This is so strange. I'm not really interested. Very different than my experiences of darkness and journeying to wherever you wanted to journey to, and very, instead of it being interpersonal, very personal. And then 9 years later, I think, I met my now wife, and she had been a part of the same church at a different branch for a big part of her life.
So same church, but different
location.
Got it.
So there's multiple. Yeah. We have 8 branches in the U.S.
Got it.
And there's many in Brazil, one in Peru, Australia, Europe. And when I saw how clear they were with the tea, and that it wasn't about making money, and that it was about spiritual investigation and deepening into yourself,
doing the work,
deepening into your community, and anchoring peace and love into yourself and into your community in a different way. I was like, I guess Scarlett knew what she was doing when we met. And I actually,
that's been like 15 years now, right? Something like that.
Yeah. I actually met Scarlett, told her it took about 9 years since we met for me to get here, but it still happened. And she thought that was pretty interesting.
That is super interesting. Like the shaman work of the Amazon rainforest, like I know they're finding out that with LiDAR technology that there were like all these civilizations and all of this interconnection of those groups in the forest, and how they like tended the forest, and how they like created, these interconnected habitats, which I find fascinating. Like that's like super, super cool to me. But one thing that I'm like, the ecotourism and like how, Hollywood has changed the way ayahuasca is, perceived within like probably the smaller groups of people like yourself who, like use the medicine to as a tool to like for deep work, instead of having it be like an acid trip where people are just having a party. Are you familiar? Like, I'd love to know if you have any insights on the history of ayahuasca, particularly around the Amazon rainforest and some of these like more ancient cultures and groups.
I mean, there's groups like in Peru, like the Shipibo, who've been using it for people say thousands and thousands of years. And other indigenous groups in Brazil and Ecuador and Bolivia and all those countries, I mean, had discovered it. And I don't know if it was through intertrade that they all each found it, or if it was through some other means that they were able to discover this vine and these leaves combined make this very transformational tea.
Yeah, it's got to be like thousands of years.
Yeah.
Like probably before Christ, I would think. Like before, like even before the Romans, I would imagine, like because these groups have been in, and I don't know, I'm kind of curious to know how far back it goes, because the relationships between plants and people have evolved over millennia, right? Like,
yeah. I feel like there's probably a million theories about how long or how or who or where it happened. And I feel like part of that, to have a mystery there, is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it is a very mysterious thing. You could drink it 20 times and never have the same experience twice. And you could drink the same the same tea 20 times that's out of the same batch of preparation, and it can present differently every time. To me, there's an intelligence to it, and it knows what you need, and it brings that to you.
Yeah.
I think that people talk about plants having some form of consciousness. I think that is true personally from my experiences. And
I believe that too.
And that, when you combine two plants that happen to be this compound that exists within our pineal gland, it's going to
kind of interesting.
It's going to do some mystical things to you.
The plant medicine work that you do, I'm sure, is just a component of a greater regimen that you have for yourself. Are there other medicinal or personal development practices that you engage in on a daily basis?
Every morning before I get out of bed, I do gratitudes, and as I go to sleep, I do gratitudes for simple things. I don't write it. I just say it to myself. I say it to God. And since Judah was really young, and our kids now are very used to it, we do like evening prayer, blessing of our food. And most of the time, Judah and Iona, we try to have them trade off, but they both want to do it after the other one, no matter whose day it is. And so,
how old are they again?
Iona just turned 3 in January, and Judah turns 5 in May.
Okay, cool.
And so, trying to, instill bringing like thanks and gratitude from a really young age, so that they understand that there's more to life than just acquiring things, and having a reciprocity, a reciprocal nature is really important. I mean, one of the things that is talked about within certain groups in Peru, in Quechua, there's a word called aini, and a loose translation of it is reciprocity, and that there needs to be a balance, give and take to everything, and that as we're taking things from the earth, we should be giving things back, as we're, just saying please and thank you is a form of that, but it can be on a deeper level, and having reverence for things, and kind of, it can reframe things in a good way. And we're working on it with, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old have the attention spans that they have, but they get a lot, and they've, you can see it when they're in nature, their awe of things, and they're
very observant.
Yeah.
Judah walked into the house just immediately observing everything around him. It was really cool to see. I love that. Curious mind. And nature, I assume, is a huge part of your practice, right? Just getting out in nature and taking hikes and being around the mountains and the oceans and the deserts.
Yeah. I mean, in Durango, like I said, there's the river that flows right through towns, and there's a beautiful river trail that you can walk. Parts of it feel more wild than other parts. Some of it you can just see, the houses or the library or whatever, but it's all really beautifully, like, done architecture, placed buildings and whatnot in the landscape. Yeah. I mean, for me, since I was a little kid, nature has been paramount for my sanity.
Yeah. I could say the same. Me too. Permaculture is what brought us together, and I absolutely love permaculture, and I use it on a daily basis as a tool, and a design science for the business, and just it's a really great set of principles and ethics that I've woven into my life. Are you still working for permaculture-based companies in Colorado, or the homestead, like gardening and that
it's
kind of
more
thing?
on my own than trying to do it for work at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, from having worked for people like Eric Olson, and his business is amazing, but when you have the bottom line of having to make money with permaculture, it can be a little challenging when you say, well, if we're going to do a proper permaculture install and we're going to build your soil and actually create a healthy soil food web, and you're like, this is going to be a 3-year process. Most homeowners are like, I want you in and out of my property in a month. I don't want to see you again and again for 3 years as you're trying to create this balanced, healthy, regenerative system. And so I think it can be done as a business, and I feel like people are doing it as a business in a good way. And it gets more and more challenging between materials and where it's coming from and supplying and all those other pieces. And I think that, I feel like we did really good work at Circlefoot. And sometimes there were certain jobs where it was like, wow, we just brought in how many pavers and where were the pavers made and what's the process to make them? And
totally.
Like the inputs and all that. So
the energy, the embodiment, and looking at that more closely. And I think Rick Taylor has done a good job over at Elder Creek, creating a carbon calculator and putting metrics upon all these materials that are being introduced into projects, and then using that calculator to determine whether you're going to offset that energy consumption in the near future or not. Yeah. Which I think a lot of permaculture practitioners don't do. They don't look at it from like a data perspective. And I think that's a big reason why I've kind of moved away from like the mainstream permaculture arena, is because there was this big clash between the financial fitness of a business and then doing the permaculture thing. I just have had a hard time kind of combining the two into a harmony that makes sense for the Bay Area Peninsula. Because it's, even though there's a lot of environmental, like there's a lot of awareness in consumerism here. Like there's just a lot of people that just care, but in terms of putting their money where their mouth is, it's a little different when we start working through a project. And I think you're right. Like, kind of want you out of there in 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, the other thing is having done Elaine Ingham's soil food web courses and learning a lot about compost. A lot of our commercial compost, even from places that are getting what they can source as high quality compost, are actually overdone. And so, you move from humics to fulvics, and fulvic acid ends up more feeding the weeds, where humic acid is feeding the things you want there. And I think about certain places that we did massive sheet mulch projects, and we brought in, sometimes 30, 40 yards of compost, and the amount of weed explosion that happened at those properties.
For sure.
And in hindsight, it was like, oh, if we could actually source the right compost that was done with a, more balanced looking before it's applied, like looking at it under a microscope, what is the fungal ratio to bacterial ratio? Are there things that you don't want to see in that you're going to put onto the landscape? And then if the soil is already super degraded, you're just kind of feeding the wrong direction of the chain. And
are you familiar with a company called I think they're called Sim Soil or Symphony Soil? They would go to properties and harvest native biology, and then they would go back to their composting production systems, and they would integrate like the native biology and make like a compost that's specific to the site. I can't remember there was a lady there that ran the company, but we were going to do a big project for Zoho in the East Bay, and we brought them in as a consultant to like work up like a composting regimen for this farm that we were designing. But unfortunately, Zoho never ended up doing the job. But I think that has a lot of impact on the landscape, is like looking at what you have in biology, and then, all the unique characteristics, and then creating like something that's going to cater to that, instead of just all these external outputs and you just get them because they're available.
Yeah.
Instead of curating them, which is completely, it's like a whole nother way of doing things. And I think for me, that to counterbalance a lot of those issues that we have with external inputs and their embodied energies, like education is so huge, I think, to like be a steward to the people that are involved on the project. So even if you can't make a huge impact in the way that you want to in the landscape, like at least making an impact in their lives, whether it's a change in perspective or a habit that they might want to reconsider for their personal development and their homestead or whatever, I think is extremely valuable, and something that I do quite a bit. There's a lot of people to people strategies or tactics that, I kind of design and help individuals, so that when they do embark on these projects in the future, they kind of trying to think a little bit outside of the box, because the conventional is just, it has to change, I think. Yeah.
And if you're working in a desert environment and you're bringing in soil from somewhere else, like compost from somewhere else, the microbes are going to die there.
Yeah.
You need something that's actually like mycelium that can grow in that place.
Environment.
And so, we got to a realm, it felt like in the mid 2000s, where it's like, well, this person's making amazing compost in Washington, I'm going to bring it to Southern California. And you're like, what? Why? Like, this doesn't make sense. It's a completely different environment.
Yeah.
And so there's that layer of the education too, of if people are able to just do site specific, and even when you have truly biologically rich compost, the application rate drops exponentially from what like the USDA might say. Mm-hmm. Like ag people might be like, oh, it's, a yard per 5 acres or something. Mm-hmm. And then this stuff, you could be like, it's a yard per 40 acres, a yard per 25 acres. It's a yard, because you compare it just under a microscope and you see the biology and you're like, oh, I'm getting so much more.
Yeah.
And then you can, do soil soaks and other things with compost teas and compost extracts and really jumpstart some things with it.
Colorado up there in Durango it's like pretty dry, isn't it?
We
outside of the snowy
historically season, used to get a pretty big monsoon season, which has shifted with changing climate patterns. But last summer ended up being really wet. We had a lot of rain through. I don't know if it was more water-wise, because I didn't really look at all the historical data, but for my friends who were from there, they were saying this was reminded them more of their childhoods than like their high school years or 20s. And so, it has the potential to be very wet, but yeah, some summers are extremely dry.
And are you working for a landscape company, or what are you up to?
I'm working for a company that's a very large commercial landscape company based out of Albuquerque called Green Summit, and they've expanded into Farmington and Durango. And so I'm cool. I'm in charge of their expansion and building out the whole division. So
amazing.
Hiring, and we have jobs that are like the anchor jobs, and then adding new clients and kind of going from there. And they have a design team within the company. There's a huge maintenance department. There's snow removal in the winter. They kind of cover all the bases. And
do you guys harvest water out there?
Colorado has some weird rules. You can do in-ground fine, but
like
storage tanks is a whole other thing. Like they have a limit on how much you can do, which doesn't fully make sense, but I think it would affect the watershed.
Is there a reason why
It's because they're at the top of so many rivers.
Gotcha.
And so they don't want people to collect so much water
and impact the
downstream watersheds that go into so many other states from Colorado. And in reality, it wouldn't have the impact, but the way that it's been looked at historically, they think it would. And so they have a limit of how much roof water you can put into tanks. But
you can put
earthworks, you can do as much as you want. And so one of the companies I worked for, we were doing very elaborate earthworks from like the watershed management group perspective and Brad's kind of permaculture books.
Yeah.
And that was fun to see. And then it's also like you see the limits. And that's why Watershed Management created their whole system with their nonprofit of the kind of co-op system where you volunteer and go do it for other people. And they do it for you and you do it for your whole neighborhood because you can affect a lot more than one neighbor does it and it's the only person in the neighborhood. And then a few years later, people are like, oh, your yard never floods. What did you do? And it finally catches on, but it's different. And that's something that I've thought about how can we bring that up into the Durango area of like having a similar co-op system that.
Have you considered like starting a consultancy or some sort of like little side hustle where you're raising awareness or you're educating the community?
Yeah, I have done a little bit of that. There's one of my old bosses she did the watershed management certification a few years after I did. She's kind of been the face of that with doing all the talks at the library and various people inviting her to kind of educate why do the rainwater harvesting with the basins and swales and kind of slowing it and sinking it and keeping it on your property. And she has some pretty good demo sites that they've created over the years. Like the public library has some rainwater harvesting at it. And the city has kind of caught on and they're adding it to some of their public buildings. Like the Santa Rita water treatment plant, which is right on the river, has a whole rainwater system that Eva and two other women designed, but they didn't install it. So it wasn't quite done to how we would do it. It's good. It's showing the potential, but we would have done it slightly differently.
Yeah.
But none of the companies were set up to take on a public works prevailing wage job with the insurance and licensing and everything else. So they were like, we did all the design, but one of the companies who does this can do this, and we'll hopefully consult with them and help them understand what they're doing.
You wouldn't need a license or anything like that if you were to just do some basic consultation work, correct?
No, I wouldn't need a license for that. And I've done some kind of side design work around that for people that have said like, I just want to do it myself. And can you show me where to put them and how deep to make them and how to connect them? And so I've helped kind of map that out for people. And, it's not a ton of money that brings in, but it's really nice to see what people can do on their own too.
Yeah. For me, the water harvesting is the most fun when developing a landscape, and being able to move and convey water and use it as a landscape feature, but also as like a functional component of designing and building an ecology at scale. It's really cool. Do you guys plan on coming back to California, or are you going to set roots in Colorado? I wanted to ask you that when we were on the phone the other day.
There's parts of me there's things that I really miss about California. But like, having lived in Sebastopol and all over Sonoma County as much as I have, and I go back and it's like, there's certain things that are still there that have the charm and the beauty and whatnot, but I'm not a super fan of the changing cultures. And, my purposeful not being on social media and those things and not being part of their cogs, like so much of the changes came with that. Like all the hikes that we used to do in high school that were local secrets, they got put on the blogs in the early 2000s. And then with Instagram, you have like, this is the exact location that photo was taken. So you're like, wow, that place that I'd go to for 10 hours and not see a soul, you go out there and there's like 50 people photographing and you're just like, this is like, I guess it's part of the process, but
part of the new, with AI and technology and social media and just how things are going, I think you'll have to find a new place. Yeah. And there's fortunately lots of nooks and crannies on the planet that I'm sure have not been riddled by Instagram content creators.
I mean, definitely around Durango, there's hikes that used to be from people that I know who've been doing them their whole lives. You used to be able to go and not see too many people, and you show up to the parking lot too late and the parking lot's full. Yeah. And you can't even do the hike. But
yeah, I think a lot about how that plays a role in people's lives and how it could potentially disconnect them with the natural world, even though that they're ironically going out to the natural world to experience it. I think there's a deeper connection there that we might be losing with the advent of AI and machine learning and technology and interest media, social media, or whatever you want to call it. Amongst all that chaos, like how would you define wealth and wellness in today's world?
Part of having a wealthy life is having, love within the family and peace within the home. And so much has been brought to the externals of financial wealth. And having grown up around a lot of really wealthy people, they aren't very happy. And they don't have love in their hearts, and they don't have peace in their families. And so I think you can reach it with money and you can reach it without money. And I think for me, modeling that for our kids, working on, my own work, my wife's own work, so that we can show them what is a healthy relationship. And that's, to me, bringing more wealth to my life and prosperity to my life, because it has a ripple effect. And other people can see it, and other people can be like, oh, what are you doing? How did you figure that out? And, we need money to survive, and we need money to be able to do the things we want to do. And talking to younger people that are graduating high school that I know and stuff, like, they're like, I want to figure out how to be rich. And I'm like, well, that's one way to look at it, but when you look at Elon Musk, does he look like a happy person to you? I personally don't see that, but I see that he's trying to fill things from his childhood and other things, and the money's not doing it. But he like, if I can get another 100 billion, I'm going to finally be there. That doesn't make sense to my mind. And, I want to be comfortable, and I want to be able to leave things for my children. And so, I'm working at, trying to get those things together for us. And, between my work and the coaching that Alon's doing with sobriety and helping people understand how to be joyful in sobriety and connect into their hearts and heal themselves from their traumas and things. I think that stuff, can help bring financial prosperity too. So
I think that resonates quite a bit with our audience. Wellness is wealth, taking care of your family and yourself and developing a regiment that focuses on things that truly matter is what we're all about. So thank you, Nick, for being here and chatting with me today. Really great to catch up, and I can't wait to catch up with you after the show, because there's probably more that we can chat about. But
yeah, always.
That's another episode of the Wealth and Wellness Report. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you like the channel, please do hit the subscribe button at the bottom, and we'll see you on the next one.